In this video, I wanted to dig a bit more into the strategy surrounding placing buildings as well as rerolling because it is such a critical aspect to the game. So the strategy is generally the same between rounds. What you're going to have to do is evaluate what makes the most sense each round as far as the timing of rerolling or just waiting. So starting out in the first wave, it should be pretty straightforward. You're just going to want to get all the buildings you have out onto your map. If you have the option, the preference is definitely to go and place certain buildings like walls up front to tank damage. However, when doing this, just try and make sure you're positioning the walls in such a way that the enemies are going to be forced to sit inside the attack range of any turrets or damage towers you have, because then you can really just take advantage of that extra time to deal damage. The mines can also be a helpful thing to tank damage early on if you really have to. However, because of how the mechanic of the mines works, if the mine is destroyed, then you don't get any of those bonus tokens. So that's something you're really just going to want to, preferably you're going to try and keep the mines out of harm's way as well. But worst comes to worst, early on, you can actually use them to tank some damage. Now, this is where the first real decision comes in and whether it really makes sense whether to re-roll or not. If you likely have plenty of room to place whatever gets rolled, then it's a pretty risk-free decision just to re-roll. But if you don't have a lot of space, then it really wouldn't be worth it most likely because you won't be able to place those buildings anyways, and the re-rolls scale in cost just as the game goes on and you continue to re-roll. So I wouldn't waste re-rolls if you don't have to. The exception I'd add to this is if your first roll just had terrible damage options, this can potentially be an issue and you might need to re-roll anyways if you don't have many troop producing or damage based buildings on the map. I would kind of put myself into the situation right now where I have this cavalry stable, this ranch, but then a wall and a mine, so I'm pretty damage light. So what I'm actually probably going to be doing is just re-rolling again anyways. Knowing when to re-roll or not does take a bit of time just to get used to knowing what buildings exist, the building shapes, and then potentially which buildings are in each level later in the game. But I don't pay really close attention to that last part. And typically I just kind of rely on how much space I have available and whether I think I can maneuver buildings around to fit or not. I have a decent amount of space. I mean, I have these 4 squares over to the left and then a couple of these areas right here up top. Ideally, I wouldn't be re-rolling just because there'd be certain buildings. If I got a couple of odd-shaped buildings, I wouldn't be able to fit them, like the mage production building. However, based on where my damage is, I actually probably am going to just re-roll anyways. So we got another wall. I'll just merge that real quick. I'll do the same with the mine. But once again, I just didn't really get great damage output buildings. So what I could do in theory, if I really had to, and this is something you do more early on, is I could sell this mine, try and reroll again. Now I finally got a little better stuff to try and deal some damage. And so what we're going to do is position this stuff around here. And then even though I kind of set myself back a little as far as had to sell a building I didn't want to, this got me in a lot better spot just from a damage perspective. Early on, those first couple of waves, before you get your hero, that's probably typically what you're going to have to end up doing a bit. So we're just going to progress through this wave real quick, just kind of showcase that. So I use that wall. So the wall is going to stall the enemy right here, and that's going to give my cavalry unit a time to deal damage, as well as it's just freezing them up so my catapult can continue to deal damage. Ideally, I actually probably will end up putting my catapult further down later in the game, but for now, this is a great spot to have him. We're going to add that. So as you progress more waves, you're also going to get the option to use tokens, these gold tokens that you produce every round naturally, as well as you can merge and just place more mines. That's going to help you produce more of these gold tokens. So these gold tokens, you can use them to clear trees, just so you can place more buildings. You are still going to need to watch out for your token budget as far as whether it makes sense to actually re-roll or not. and if you're going to have the tokens needed to clear obstacles and actually field all those buildings from a reroll. So in this case, I could probably just go and place all my buildings. But as far as evaluating whether it makes sense to reroll, I actually probably won't reroll just because I'm going to be stuck in this awkward situation where I would spend 8 gold to reroll, but then I would only have, or 8 tokens to reroll, then I'd only have 2 of those tokens left over, so I wouldn't actually be able to clear a tree with my tokens, so it wouldn't really make sense to reroll in this case. So a big part of making the most out of your rolls and rerolls is fitting as many buildings onto your map as possible. Sometimes this just really means placing temporary buildings in areas that really just aren't an ideal location, but you're kind of just temporarily putting them there. Like you see, I put this catapult over on the left side. Ideally, I'd have it further back, but for now, early on, sometimes that's just what you got to do to make everything fit on the map. And then later on in the level, once I actually have some more gold tokens and I can organize my stuff a little better, I'll move it further back just because I do want to shield those higher damage dealing buildings. One thing I would note is you can use this reroll area down at the bottom as a sort of temporary sort of bench, and then you can move stuff from the map to the bottom area for a minute to help you organize and get buildings all fitting in the map. This is capped to 3 spaces, so I can't just have my reroll buildings and then try and move stuff down there. It won't let me. A couple of things to just be aware of here. Make sure you don't accidentally sell the building when you're trying to move it down here. But if I move this L-shaped mine here, I can move it down into that section and then it just drops down in there. Just make sure you don't go too far and accidentally sell that building. And then just make sure your bench is always empty before we start this next wave, just because anything on that bench is going to disappear once the next wave starts and you can't get it back, the exception being this hero. That hero will stay there even if you don't place it for a couple of waves. But so ideally, in this just a little gap here, I am going to want to make sure I can go and place all of these buildings or merge them or do something with them so they don't just get wasted entirely. So on that note, the last thing I wanted to cover in this video was selling buildings, which I did with that one mine. At any point in between waves, you can drag buildings to the bottom of the screen and you can sell them, and you can get some of those gold tokens, which can be used for clearing obstacles or rolling for more buildings. Generally, the preference is just to use these buildings out on the map, but sometimes you get put in a situation where you can't fit your buildings anywhere. What you can do is you can sell any of the buildings you have on your map, or also, if a building's just sitting on your bench, you can also drag it down and sell it. So you do really just want to make sure you've either placed all your buildings either on the map or you've sold them. Typically, selling buildings doesn't give you a ton of tokens, but anything can be helpful, especially early on. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and let me know if you have any questions.